Hello there, people of the internet. I have in my hands right here a Lee Metford. I believe that this is an 1895 long rifle Lee Metford that was cut down into a carbine version. It's actually a really nice little rifle. It's lightweight, it's handy. I'll be honest, I really like this thing. But I got this from RTI, and whenever I'd gotten it, it was semi-functional. And it needed a little bit of work to get it like really up and going, but I did successfully take it out to the gun range and actually send some rounds through it. The big thing with these Lee Metford patterns is with the Metford rifling, they're designed to handle black powder. So I load black powder 303 to fire through this thing. It absolutely can handle smokeless powder 303, but I load black powder 303 so I can fire it through this thing just to conserve the longevity of the Lee Metford rifling. Not only that, but I enjoy firing black powder cartridges. But whenever I had taken this out to shoot it, we had extractor problems. The extractor from this looks like it was handmade at some point, and it was not good. It was not doing it. It was a very poorly made handmade part. So I decided to go ahead and swap out that extractor for one that I was under the impression would work. And I know that the Lee Metford and the Lee Enfield both have the same action. So I was under the impression, hey, maybe they have the same exact ejector. And I can go ahead and just take a standard Lee, like #1 Mark III Lee Enfield ejector, plop it into this Lee Metford, and send the rifle properly running. Well, it turns out that after I had done that, now my Lee Metford does not close, like the bolt itself does not close because the actual ejector is getting caught on the receiver. So while I was doing this, I was thinking to myself, you know what, why don't I document my findings here? Because I've been messing around with this Lee Metford for a straight minute, and I've been trying to do research on bolt compatibility between the Lee Metford and the Lee Enfield. So I couldn't find any information on bolt compatibility between the rifles. Like, they're very similar systems, but nobody could give me any real definite answers as to anything. So I've just kind of been experimenting, and I figured I'd make this video talking about my findings. So the actual extractor itself appears to be a different piece, or at least a different size. I think that if I were to just grind the tip off of this extractor just a little bit to where it can actually fit into the section of receiver right here that is cut out for the extractor, I think that this extractor will work under that case. The extractor actually fits inside the Lee Metford bolt, and the spring system seems to operate just fine. The issue that I'm running in with is that the actual extractor itself, like the triangular part on the top of the extractor, seems to be a little bit larger than a Lee Metford extractor. Probably just a bit more material added there for increased durability. Is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah, increased durability. We're going to go ahead and go with that one. Increased lifespan, that was the word I was looking for. But if I were to just grind a little bit of that tip off to where the bolt can actually close, I feel like this extractor is going to work just fine. Now, with a little bit of the tip, I'm going to have to like round it off versus just grinding it flat, because that extractor has to pop over the rim of a cartridge, and if it's just a flat face thing, it's just going to smack into that cartridge, and we're going to be having difficulties anyway. So that's going to take a little bit of fabrication work. I decided to go ahead and, just for giggles, see if a Lee Enfield bolt will fit and work inside of a Lee Metford. Turns out, no, it will not. The actual bolt faces themselves appear to be different dimensions. However, I took the bolt face from my Lee Metford and put it onto a Lee Enfield bolt, and it did go click, and I imagine it probably would go bang. That being said, on the Lee Metford that I have right here, the safety on this rifle is right here on the actual bolt body itself, versus something like a #1 Mark III, where the safety is on the side of the receiver. So the safety interface, I have no idea how they would actually interact with one another. But if we're ignoring the safety capabilities, like not ignoring safety, just ignoring the safety on the rifle, like the manual safety, then I'm pretty sure that you can use a number 1 Mark III bolt body and throw on a Metford bolt head, and it should work okay. But all of this right here is just kind of guesses on my part. Yeah, I'm not entirely certain. As a matter of fact, while I'm sitting here thinking about it, let me go grab my number 1 Mark III here. I've got my number 1 Mark III here. This one's been sporterized, and this one donated its ejector to the Metford just in an attempt to see if it would actually function. I'm going to pull the bolt and try doing a bolt swap here, simply because I want to see if maybe the ejector is what stopped the bolt from setting into the rifle. Now you can tell a Metford bolt from an Enfield bolt, because an Enfield bolt is like, it's got this flat face right here on this big piece of metal jutting out the side of it, versus the Metford bolt, which has these 2 little locking lugs on it. And those aren't like rifle locking lugs, those are locking lugs that lock into a dust cover, which I do not have. But my Lee Enfield bolt is now missing the extractor, and I'm just curious to see if it will actually close on the Lee Metford now. Aha, it does. Look at that. Alright, so the number 1 Mark III bolt, it's not headspace. I would definitely want to headspace this before I ever go pulling a trigger on it. But the number 1 Mark III bolt seems to be interchangeable with a Lee Metford, with the exception of that extractor. So that's pretty cool. I'm gonna have to remember that for the future. I actually really like this bolt right here. It's in much better shape than the original Metford bolt. But the original Metford bolt is a Metford bolt, so it's going back in the Metford. I just really like the way that this looks. It's all shiny. But as you can see, the number 1 Mark III rifle, I mean, it doesn't have any safeties on it or anything, but the number 1 Mark III bolt does fit inside the Metford. Pull this trigger. Yeah, I imagine that it probably would go bang. You just don't have any safety mechanisms on this thing, so that's one of the things that you'd have to pay attention to. I would recommend not walking around with one in the chamber if you end up in that sort of situation. So, okay, cool. I just learned that literally just now on camera. So now I'm going to put the Metford bolt back in here, and I got to do a little bit of fabrication on that extractor in an effort to fix it, because I want my Lee Metford to have a working extractor, and apparently that's going to be more difficult than I was expecting it to be. I was hoping that I could just pop a Lee Enfield extractor in this bad boy and send it on its way. Alright, now why are you not closing? Ah, okay, safety. Okay, cool. That's not that big of a deal. Alright, well, there's my findings on my Lee Metford number 1 or my Lee Metford and Lee Enfield number 1 bolt interchangeability. They appear to interchange. You'll have to headspace it to make sure that everything works right, and the extractor itself seems to be a little bit different because my Lee Metford bolt does not close with that Lee Enfield extractor, but they appear to be the same. So thanks for watching, folks. Appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. I'm going to go do some fabrication work on this thing right here in an effort to get it up and going. I'll see you guys on the next episode. Since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett.
Shame that bolt action shotguns aren't more mainstream.